Croeso, Difda, Bernachtin, Gia Hwitch, Fulcher, Daymat. Welcome to the Celtic Myths and Legends podcast. I am your humble host, Sian Esther Powell, and I'm going to be taking you on a journey through all the myths and legends of the 6 Celtic nations. That's Wales, Cornwall, Brittany, Isle of Man, Scotland and Ireland. Welcome. Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you very much for your patience in waiting 6 whole months for this episode. Is it just me or is that introduction really rubbish now? I changed computers a while back. I went from one completely ancient relic to another just ancient relic without the completely. So I don't know, and my microphone is busted and I've got a new one and I don't know how to use it. So suffice to say, thank you very much for being here after 6 months. I had actually started to do an episode probably about 6 months ago. I'd started recording it and I thought I had a good chunk of it done and I just hadn't revisited it because life got in the way and now I can't find it anywhere, so I guess we're starting again. The world is a cheery place, isn't it, listeners? And that's why we're going to be speaking about Headless Horsemen today. If you have ever listened to my podcast before, you will know that each episode we sort of focus on one of the 6 Celtic nations, and then sometimes I sort of branch off and compare them to the myths and legends of some of the other Celtic nations and try and find some similarities, but we really kind of begin and focus on one. And of course, if you know the order that we're doing it in, Wales was last, so we have Ireland this episode. Maybe that's where the Sleepy Hollow myth comes from. I don't know. Maybe I should look into that. I probably should have researched that before I started this episode. Anyway, there's always time for me to pause and do some quick fire research now. But we're going to be talking about the Dullahan in Irish mythology. The Dullahan, who is depicted as a headless rider on a black steed. But if that wasn't creepy enough, if that image was not disturbing enough, he also happens to carry his own head high. I was almost about to say high up above his head. I was about to say he carries his head high above his head. No, he doesn't, because he doesn't have a head. But he carries his own head up high. There you go. That is a nice, lovely, friendly image for you all today. Here is a little writing prompt. I want you to write a paragraph or a few paragraphs on if you were like a medieval peasant and suddenly a headless horseman holding his own head just gallops right on past you through the mist. Yeah, how would you feel about that? Would you be vibing? Would you be horrified? At this point, I feel like I would just be vibing with it. Do you know what I mean? The world is so bonkers. I feel a headless horseman thrown into the mix. Why not? Okay, I'm ready. I'm here. It's happening. Why not? I'm going to be honest with you, my friends. There's probably going to be minimal editing of this episode because I'm just getting to the point where I'm like, if I just keep obsessing over like editing and producing like really professional sounding podcasts, I am never going to upload anything ever again because I'm tired. You know, I'm very, very busy. I've got so much on my plate. So at this point, this is free content. I'm just going to make what I make and hopefully some people will enjoy it. And can I say a big thank you to everyone who has recently sent me emails, sent me messages on Facebook, on Instagram. It might take me a while to get to those messages, but I eventually do and will. And it really means so much to me every single time I read something. It's really kind of you to make the effort to contact me and to tell me about things that you're interested in, or just to say that you like the episode or you like the podcast in general. Thank you very much. I'm really glad that you're here listening. Now let's get on and talk about horrifying headless horsemen. So I did do my quick bit of researching, and apparently Irving, who wrote the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, was inspired by lots of myths and legends of Europe, and apparently there's lots of headless horsemen riding around in various myths found in Germany, found in Scandinavia, found in Scotland. Lots of just headless horsemen running around, and this is what cracks me up. Wikipedia, this because I'm on Wikipedia for this quick bit of research. I'm sorry. It says usually viewed as omens of ill fortune. Really? What gave it away? The fact that they have no head? I would have thought that they're obviously omens of great fortune. Just running around with holding your own head up. Just sounds like very lucky to me. Sounds like they're having a very good and healthy time of it. So let's get into the physical description of the Dullahan. And do you know what I love about folklore is that it really doesn't pull any punches, does it? This head has a rictus grin, full of malice, spreading from cheek to cheek, and his eyes are constantly roving around his head, wildly moving, goggly-eyed, decapitated head, just floating around the countryside there. And apparently his eyes are constantly moving, and he can see, even on the darkest nights, he can see across the whole of the countryside. So I'm sorry, if you're going for a nice evening walk, the Dullahan can see you. He is watching your I'm sorry. Please enjoy your pleasant dog walk without thinking of headless horsemen. This makes it better though. The skin of the head is said to have the same sort of colour and consistency of mouldy cheese. So I'd like you to imagine just this floating head, mouldy cheese-like skin. I'm going to assume black, kind of ragged, scraggly hair, wild eyes just moving about constantly, and a horrible rictus grin. That sounds like something that a edgy teenager has wrote on Reddit No Sleep. But there we go. There's actual folklore for you, and I love it. All of these kind of urban legends, I've touched on it before actually, a lot of the urban legends that you find on places like Reddit and other places on the internet, they all stem from somewhere, and all people tell scary stories to one another. And it's not just found in Ireland. The Dullahan is from Irish mythology. But tales of spooky horsemen or creepy, horrifying, human-like creatures with rictus grins and who obviously do not mean you any good, those tales can be found in all sorts of cultures and myths and legends. Really, probably at its core, it's a good story about, don't be walking around alone in the dark, because there's kelpies out there, there's headless horsemen, there's all sorts of nasty creatures just ready to give you a bad time. So look after yourself. Carry some salt in your pocket though, in case you come after piskies, because at least piskies don't like salt, and you could throw salt at the Dullahan. I don't know if that would work. He probably wouldn't even be bothered by it, but you could try it. I hope that you're never in the situation where you have to, but you could try it as a last resort. So let's go back once again. Let's set the scene. You're a medieval peasant, and now, through the mist, this great big black steed kind of gallops towards you, and you can't quite make out the figure. And he's holding his head. His head looks like mouldy cheese. Its eyes are looking directly at me. Is that the most frightening this image could become? No, because he also carries a human spine as a whip. You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Or if you're a nerd like me, you've probably read about it many times. He carries a human spine as a whip. Just let that mental image settle in for you. I mean, that is horrifying, but I have to admit, his carriage literally sounds like the coolest thing ever. Like, apparently it's adorned with skulls that have candles inside them, like thigh bones make up the wheels. It is like a goth's little dream. I just think that we should recreate the carriage without the headless horseman and the horrifying, like, decapitated head and the skull, not the skull, the spine whip. I mean, all that stuff is like, it's really cool to read about, but I think that would be horrifying to see in real life. But the carriage with the bones and all that stuff, that would just be cool. full stop. That would be very, very cool. You'd have to make sure that they're ethically sourced bones. No buying your bones from the internet. Thank you very much. Bone sellers. I don't know if anyone's on TikTok. I'm on TikTok. I think a few of you have found me on there, and there's a really horrifying, alarming amount of bone sellers on there. We don't we don't support that here. That's very weird. Anyway, let's carry on. Now, like many creatures in Irish mythology, like the banshee as well, the Dullahan is used in myth. Its kind of purpose in a lot of stories is to be a sort of death portent. So wherever it stops, it's said to be that is going to be the place where someone dies, and it will call out someone's name, and whereby, you know, hearing their name kind of floating through the mist and wind, they will immediately die, which is probably a bit of a kindness because it means they won't get to see the horrible moulded cheese head or like the spine whip. They'll just die from the voice. I think that's probably a bit of a kindness, actually. So usually with these really horrifying creatures from mythology, we need to talk about a way to, like a strategy to either defeat it or evade it. How are you going to get away from the Dullahan if he's riding through the mist towards you and you're a medieval peasant? Well, here's the thing. Apparently gold objects could make the Dullahan disappear. Gold. Just let that sink in. Gold. You're a medieval peasant and you need gold. So essentially what we're saying is the Dullahan is actually really classist. I think you would get along really well with this government. What was that? Nothing. Nothing. What's really interesting is that I've sort of seen the Dullahan described as not just like a single creature. He's not just one single headless horseman. I've sort of seen him described as multiple, like a Dullahan rather than the Dullahan. I kind of don't know if that makes him less or more scary, that there's just like loads of headless horsemen kind of riding around in rural Ireland, apparently, or that there's just like one creepy guy that you really don't want to see. I feel like when there's just one, it's creepier for me somehow than just multiple. That kind of kills some of the scariness for me. So I hope you enjoyed that little description of the Dullahan in Irish mythology. Like I said, Headless Horseman holds his own head above where I'm sure his shoulders are, but head isn't, because he's headless. Mouldy cheese head, swivelling eyeballs, rictus grin, malice full. But gold can stop him, so you better start making some money. Buy some of that gold. Get a side hustle or two. That's going to save you. I really, really want to talk about a Breton legend now, but I'm gonna hold off. I'm gonna hold off and make sure that I do it in its own episode, because the Ankou or Ancal deserves its own proper episode. I did do it as a bonus episode once. I'm sure I did. I'm sure I did a whole, basically I did a half-hour episode. Whoever I did that episode for, do you mind sending that to me? Because I changed computers and I actually lost quite a few of the episodes that I made. So when I had a little bit more time and a little bit more headspace, I was about to say better mental health then. I'm not in dire straits, by the way, guys. I have a full-time job. I'm doing okay, I think. I'm just tired. I actually did do quite a few mini episodes for people. But the thing is that my mini episodes were never 5 minutes, and they were usually 25 minutes to half an hour. So it was basically just a whole normal episode length. And I did quite a few of those. And a lot of them are lost. A lot of them are gone. So if you have any of them, if you are one of my Patreons and you have one of those, do you mind sending it back to me, please? I might be able to find it one day. Who knows? But I definitely did do one on the Breton Ankou, and I'm not going to listen back through my whole bonus episode. But if you've been binge listening to this podcast and you're like, oh no, you covered that in one of the bonus ones, let me know, and I won't repeat it completely, but it's a really cool thing. Anyway, death portents in folklore and mythology are just really, really interesting in general. A lot of folklore is associated with, times of death. And I think that when you have all of these kind of rituals and folklore and storytelling concerning death, it almost makes death more accessible to talk about. in a way. We sort of shy away from talking about death a lot in British society. I can only speak for, Britain because I am British. But probably in a lot of other places as well, we very much avoid speaking about death. And I heard the concept of a death cafe recently, which actually sounds incredible. It's just, you just meet up and talk about death and kind of, make it more accessible. Anyway, this is really cheery stuff. I'm so sorry. What is this? You're tuning in. You're like, oh my gosh, Sian's uploaded a new episode. Wow, I bet it's going to be a cute little one on pixies or something. No, it's just about death. Oh my God. We need to lighten the mood up here. We really need to lighten the mood up. But my point is that you can use folklore to have really deep, kind of almost stigmatized conversations. And I think that we can use folklore, and I certainly like to use folklore sometimes, to talk about kind of real world issues, but you dress it up with a bit of myths and legends and a bit of folklore, and you can get away with talking about things probably in a much more in-depth, honest way than you sometimes can trying to be direct. We shoo away and shy away from lots of different topics, but I think when you dress up in folklore, you can have wonderful, beautiful conversations about the human experience and about contemporary issues today in society, as well as what people were experiencing in the past as well. I'm not going to do my whole speech on what I think folklore is, because I basically do it in every episode, so you know by now, but I do think it's a beautiful, wonderful tool that we should and, can use. Human beings have been telling each other stories since the beginning of it all. We have always been telling each other stories, weaving lessons and knowledge and morality into storytelling. This is not, anything new. So yeah, I think sometimes there's this idea that's a little bit silly, a little bit quaint to be interested in myths and legends and folklore, a little bit backward. But I would argue it's not backward at all. In fact, it's just, even though it's something that we've always done, it's something that human beings can continue to do as well. And actually you can use folklore and you can use stories from the past to look not into the future. We're not going to tell what the future is, but to look forward to the future. You can use the past to influence and to inform the future, is essentially my little rambling for tonight. It really brings me on to the idea of having like sort of rituals around important and difficult conversations and events, such as death. In fact, in the 1888 Fairy and Folk Tales of the Irish Peasantry, edited by W.B. Yeats, it mentions the Banshee, it mentions the Dullahan, it mentions the Coach Bower, which I hadn't heard that term, but that's apparently a term for death coach. So death coach is in fact, it is a trope. It's a prominent storytelling tool found in a lot of European stories. Most prominent in Irish mythology, but also found in other stories as well. And it is the sound of the coach that is a death portent. It's the hearing of the coach, much like it's the hearing of your name whispered on the wind, of the Dullahan kind of crying out. That is what's going to kill you. That is the death portent. And the idea is that once the kind of death coach has come to Earth, it can never leave empty. So there's really this discussion on everyone is going to die. There is no way that you can escape death. And many mythic heroes and people found in lots of myths and legends have tried to, much to their detriment, evade death itself. And it simply cannot be done. You can find two people in the world who are the most dissimilar human beings. But you know what we all have in common? We all were born and we're all going to die. That's what binds us together. So it's really an interesting conversation on the inevitability of death. I think when you put death in stories like this, it almost makes it less frightening in a way. I don't know how to explain it, because obviously no one wants to die because a horrifying headless horseman is galloping through the rural countryside screaming your name. That is not how anyone wants to go. But the fact that it sort of turns death into something talked about, not shied away from, it kind of, yeah, I don't know. I'm going to stop talking about death now, except I'm not, because I have another point to make. The death coach also pops up in Scottish mythology as well, actually, and it's said to collect the souls of the dead on the Royal Mile from time to time. And what I really like about a lot of Irish mythology is that it seems to be very much based around families. Like, that's why I really like the idea of the banshee being tied to certain families. You know, you can make of that what you will. Was she once a member of that family? You know, do banshees have to go to some sort of training academy where they're given a roster of the families that they have to look after? You know, I don't know. These are questions that I have about the banshee, and probably many people. Okay, no one else has these questions about the banshee, but maybe you do now. Do you now? Okay. But this is something I really liked about the fairy and folk tales of the Irish peasantry. There's a little section on omens, and it says, "We have other omens beside the banshee and the Dullahan and the Coach-a-Bower. I know one family where death is announced by the cracking of a whip. Some families are attended by phantoms of ravens or other birds. When McManus, a 48 celebrity, was sitting by his dying brother, a bird of vulture-like appearance came through the window and lighted on the breast of the dying man. The two watched in terror, not daring to drive it off. It crouched there, bright-eyed, till the soul left the body. It was considered a most evil omen. Lethanu worked this into a tale. I have good authority for tracing its origin to the McManus and his brother." I always love that aside in collections of folk tales, is when the folklorist is kind of like writing a bit of an aside or breaking the fourth wall, and he's like, I've heard it on good authority. You know, you trust me, bro. I've heard that actually that person is very trustworthy. I just really like those little asides. But anyway, I thought it was really interesting that it's the cracking of a whip that is like a death portent. And excuse me, your funeral being attended by a phantom of ravens, badass. Excuse me, if my funeral is not attended by a phantom of ravens, then I have just done life wrong. I was just not living, okay? That is now my new goal. I mean, I'm not trying to wish my life away. I would like another 172 years approximately. But after my 172 years, I would like my funeral to be attended to by a gigantic phantom of ravens. Thank you very much. It's been all sorts of interesting sort of academic discussions on the Dullahan and what it is said to represent. Now, some people associate the Dullahan with the Irish mythological figure of the Crom Deve or Crom Dove. I might be saying Deve because U is often the I sound in Welsh, but obviously Irish and Welsh are not the same. So it might be Crom Dove, this Irish mythological figure, which is in turn based on a supposed Irish god, or another mythological figure which is associated with human sacrifice, the Crom Cruach. So yeah, spooky stuff all around. But what's really fascinating about mythological figures that are often associated with sort of human sacrifice or sacrifice in general is that could be seen as being, you know, very associated with death. But in fact, they are usually fertility gods or fertility figures. So people would be sacrificing things to them for new plants and new food and what have you to grow. So death and life are very much part of the same figure, part of the same cycle, a part of the same story, you know, inherently tied together in a lot of these mythological figures. I always find that really, really, really fascinating. You know, there can be no death without life, but similarly there can be no kind of life without death. So Crom Cruach was sort of outlawed by St. Patrick and was often written about by medieval monks like some evil, horrible kind of sacrificing humans to this like satanic figure, really, really creepy stuff. But actually, a lot of people view him as a pre-Christian god, a pre-Christian Celtic deity who was a fertility figure, fertility god. There's a lot of really interesting discussions about the etymology of the name itself, whether or not it's associated with being sort of twisted and stooped and bent over, or whether it's in fact associated with like stacks of grain and, you know, bountiful harvests and things like this. So this is a really interesting case for, again, why language is really important to places and really important to culture and really important to storytelling. Is language holds so many keys for what these stories are getting at. So I often, and I've used it before, and those who have listened to all of my episodes will remember this one, hopefully. But the Cornish name for St Michael's Mount is Carreg Lucan Cws, which means grey rock in the wood. But St Michael's Mount is a tidal island. It's not a woodland, so that makes no sense until you've seen that you couple a rare spring tide with a storm, and a petrified forest of 5,000 years old gets unleashed under Mounts Bay. So the Cornish language name, Carreg Lucan Cws, the grey rock in the wood, holds that history. It holds that very real history that, in fact, once this wasn't all sea, this wasn't a tidal island, this one time this was flooded because one time this was a forest, this was woodland. And I think it's the same with a lot of pieces of folklore across the Celtic nations and across every single culture of the world, is that when you retain bits of minority and indigenous languages, you also retain so much rich tapestry of history and culture and heritage and meaning with them as well. So yeah, I'm a big proponent of looking after and protecting and promoting indigenous and minority languages for this reason, amongst many others. But as a sort of amateur folklorist, of course, that is a big reason why I think it's really important that we respect and promote and look after these languages and don't try to anglicise them constantly. It's in the 12th century book of Leinster, I'm sorry, I'm pronouncing that so wrong probably, that Crom Cruach is really portrayed as this sort of bent over figure hidden in shrouds of mists, and people are kind of sacrificing their firstborn for good grain and milk. So you could say, oh, it's the Christians making the pagan myth seem evil and horrifying, but it, you know, whether you like it or not, a lot of our knowledge on mythology comes from Christian texts. So, you know, you've got to take it with a pinch of salt, but also, you know, it is really interesting to kind of analyse the different angles that these myths have and some of the biases that might have been felt and propagated in some of these stories. His cult image is usually described as 12 figures, and there's lots of gold and there's lots of silver. So we're coming back to the gold again. But yes, Dullahan has been associated with the Crom Div or Crom Dove, who is in turn associated with the Crom Cruach. So it's all a little bit convoluted and crazy and bonkers, like folklore usually is. But suffice to say, there's a lot of death portents in Irish mythology, and in fact quite a lot of death portents found in lots of Celtic myths and legends across the 6 Celtic nations. So I hope that I want to say enjoyed, but it's been quite a dark episode, but I've strangely enjoyed myself with it, even though I procrastinated halfway through recording it and took about 4 or 5 hours out just to kind of sit on my phone. And I don't think I even did much on my phone. I just sat there. I need to work on my brain. I need to work on myself. Thank you very, very much for listening. I really so appreciate everyone who's been listening to me from the beginning, and everyone who has very recently started listening to me and has sent me emails or messages. It's really kind of you. Thank you very much. I'm uploading this, so I will be continuing with this podcast, and I think it's just going to be like this. It's going to be a lot less edited. I really enjoy editing. I love the editing process. I really like some of the more professional sounding episodes that I've done with music in the background and that sort of stuff, but it really takes time, and it's time. I'm time short at the moment. I don't have a lot of time to give, so if I'm going to be continuing with this podcast for now and the stage I'm at in my life, it's probably going to have to be like this, something that I can sit down, I can chat to you about, and then hash it out, and hopefully it will sound okay. On that note, I wanted to ask if anyone would be interested if I set up a Twitch channel or something like that, where I can do like a regular slot where I either like read something, or I just kind of just talk. I just randomly talk about myths and legends and that sort of stuff, and it's that very off the cuff thing. So if that's something that you'd be interested in, let me know, because I'll think about doing that, because that might suit me a bit more. Anyway, if you'd like to support me, please follow me on Facebook or Twitter at Celtic Myths and Legends Podcast. If you'd like to get in contact with me, you can at celticmythspodcast@outlook.com. If you want to be a patron of me on Patreon, that would be ever so bloody lovely. I'd really, really appreciate it, and I'd thank you very, very, very much. One day I would actually like to get enough money from this that I could sort of almost treat it like a bit of a part-time job. But the thing is, I'm not going to get to that stage if I never upload anything, so I think I need to bite the bullet, upload lots of rough, silly stuff for a while, and then hopefully in the future I'll be at a stage and at a point where I can produce much better quality work for you. So yeah, I'm sorry this one's been very off the cuff. Hopefully that you've enjoyed it, even though it's been very gothic and strange and weird. I like gothic and strange and weird though, personally, and I hope that wherever you are in the world right now, you're finding some peace. It's a crazy world that we're living in right now, but I'm wishing the best for you all. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to chatting to you again on the next episode, which I'm hoping will not be in another 6 months' time. I think I'm going to try and upload much more regularly. Just it's going to be this vibe, I'm afraid. So hopefully you've enjoyed it, and thank you, and see you again. Well, I won't see you, but hopefully you will hear me again soon.